What's going on, everybody? This is James Grandmaster Facts Boyce, and this is another episode of the Facts Project. Today, special guest, James Enoch Church from Black Minds Publishing, creator of Immortal Dark, brand new manga that's out there on Kickstarter right now with about 9 days left. So thank you for being here, brother.
Yo, thank you for having me. I have been hearing a lot about you through the grapevine and other creators that I'm cool with. So I'm glad to finally be able to sit down and chop it up with you.
I appreciate that, man. That means a lot. That means a lot. So, for one, I wanted to ask you this being your first go round, of course, being a fan of comics for so long and having the opportunity to basically put yours out for the very first time. How does it feel? Because you're fully funded already.
Yeah. Yo, it's crazy because the Kickstarter is for chapter 2, and I was really apprehensive about using Kickstarter for a lot of reasons. I've heard so many stories about creators going into debt and all those things, and I have a weird relationship with crowdfunding in general, which is it's 1,000% some personal shit for real.
Understood.
Yeah, but I had posted a live talking about just the complications with funding, because chapter 1 was funded basically majority from my pocket, and then Tommy, who is our editor, pitched in, and then 2 of my close friends pitched in as well. And yeah, having it be fully funded before we finished already surpassed my expectations. You feel me? I thought it was going to take the full 30 days. And shout out to Brian Covington from Between Magic and Dreams, because he was actually the one who, after I did the live talking about my funding complications and my apprehensions with Kickstarter, he hit me up immediately after and was yo, let me put you on game. He gave me some tips about how to navigate Kickstarter, how to make sure I'm not going into debt. And then he also did a live with me to help promote. And that that day we jumped from 1,600 to 2,200 before the live was even done. It was crazy. So it's really affirming. It makes me feel very appreciated by the community. And words of affirmation is one of my love languages. So it's that shit is really giving me all the things that I will hope for from putting something that is a labor of my passions out.
That's what's happening, man. So let's get into this book. So from how I'm going to describe it myself, I'm looking at a supernatural martial arts manga, with the interesting dichotomy between 2 very, very powerful individuals who happen to be siblings. Nico Savage and his sister, who happens to be the stronger one out of the 2 at the moment. You described this as almost like a love letter to mental health being a driving force. And how is that subjective in this book?
Yeah. So mental health is specifically as it relates to Black people. Obviously I care about mental health as a whole, but with me being Black and me coming from a Black family where generational trauma is a thing, that is my primary focus. And then, you can just take that knowledge and apply it to any other culture if you want to. And I found it really important to have something that's centered on that, because I'm a avid consumer of anime, manga, comics. And sometimes I feel that be the little key that's missing. I think about Sasuke, and I'm a big Sasuke fan. But part of the reason I'm a huge Sasuke fan is because I'm a trauma-informed educator, and because I'm reading into all these things that are happening that Kishimoto didn't necessarily do the best job of presenting in the story. And so I'm what does it look like to have a project that does center on that and still gives you are the things that you like about like those genres. And so with the first book, I really was trying to figure out, how do I create a first chapter that keeps people's attention, gets people interested without doing like an information dump or like all these things. And then how do I also do that while still tying in the mental health aspect, so that it's clear like this is not going to be just like your regular thing, like mental health is going to be a thread throughout the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I pulled some ideas from a couple different spaces that culminated into what is chapter 1. So the first thing I pulled from not Marvel, DC, when I first started writing the chapters, the script for the chapters, they had just started their run for DC Future State.
Yeah.
And I was reading, what was it called? Is it Future State Detective? It's the one where basically the whole city is out to get Bruce Wayne.
Mm-hmm.
And like he is like a super dumbed down version of Batman because he doesn't have access to all the high tech stuff and like all that.
Right.
And the chapter started with him talking about how Gotham is a graveyard, and it was just like a narration dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, this is a really good way to set the scene for the manga. So I need to make sure that the introduction starts off with like kind of the mental health thesis, so to speak, so that whatever else happens in the chapter, you'll look at it through that lens, because that's what is the first thing that was presented to you. And that dialogue about agency actually came from an interview that I did with a good homie of mine, Kai Davis. She's a really, really dope poet in the Philadelphia area. And she was doing a project on survivors of sexual assault, which I am. And she interviewed me about my process of healing. And one of the things I said in the interview was that during like all my processing, I realized that like agency is something I always have. It's just not something that people always honor. And
Mm-hmm.
that's like a huge difference between like saying I no longer have agency. It's like, no, the power is always yours. It's just a matter of if the people who you're in community with are respecting that agency. And then, you know, when you go through trauma, it does shape your mind in a way where you feel like it doesn't exist. It's like, yo, I experienced this, and so I'm these things now, or I feel these things, or these things are to be true. And it's like, no, your power, it never went anywhere. And I think that is a crucial aspect of like what Nico is
Yeah.
grappling with to some degree. And so I wanted to start with that, and then everything that follows after is kind of just like dropping you in the middle of the world, which I took from is an idea that was influenced by this anime called Darling in the Franxx.
Mm.
And basically it's like a world where people live on like these motorized like floating island kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
All the terminology in the anime is based off plants or whatever, but they just drop you in the middle of the world and you figure out what's going on based on the conversations that the characters are having and like what's going on. And I was like, I like that vibe. You feel me? And so those two things came together to make what is chapter 1.
That's what's up. Now, when you're talking about agency, you're not necessarily talking about like business. You're talking about the action or intervention. Basically, how you described it is how trauma impairs our ability to acknowledge. So,
Uh,
like, oh no, go ahead.
yeah. So it's like in that interview that I pulled my own quote from, which is weird to say. One of the
It stood out. It stood out.
Thank you. One of the examples I gave was like, if I go to my boss, and I'm like, yo, I need a day off, and my boss says no, I still have agency in that situation. And I actualize my agency by advocating for my day off. I requested a thing. My boss just didn't honor it and said no, right? And you know what trauma does is like, I could leave that situation and then I could think I'm never allowed to have a day off. You
Yeah.
feel me? Where I have to earn my day off. And then I start to separate from my agency, which then also makes me separate from, to some degree, my accountability, because now I become someone that everything is happening to, because I no longer see my own power in the situation. And
Mhm.
that's very much Nico's mind state for sure.
Got you. Now, I wanted to ask about the importance in breaking generational trauma, because generally, just in the book itself, within the first couple of issues, from what I've read so far,
Mm,
certain things are kind of like, in hindsight, you could see it. It's
mm,
there in plain, is there plain to see. So
mm,
you have a broken family. You have
mm,
a brother who has not seen his sister in close to 6 years.
mm,
You have references towards other family members in the form of abuse,
mm,
and
mm,
it's almost like it's a reflection, an open mirror, as you can literally hear from their conversations how they talk to others,
mm,
that there is a mountain of abuse that's there.
mhm,
And in like River's sense, throughout the entire issue, she has this calm about her,
mhm,
where like, she doesn't seem too angered by anything. Like, she's almost completely still. But the thing is, once she's turned on to like another meter,
mhm,
it's game over.
mhm,
You know. So and that's what, just from what I'm seeing. But
mhm,
the importance in breaking generational trauma, I wanted to more so advocate to the fact that how you wrote this, how you wrote the book, and how it's basically depicted through the illustrations.
mhm,
How did you, all right, how did you basically get the characters to reference themselves, more so River than anything, because she's more so the focal point in this issue,
mhm,
to where she is, you could see it in her. How does she portray trauma?
mm, mm, mm. Whew. Okay. Let me see. How can I answer this? Uh, I follow White Manga,
Hmm.
um, who is the creator of Apple Black,
Yeah.
which is a dope manga, and Saturday AM. And he often does like tutorial videos on his YouTube. He did this video, it's like 20 minutes long, about semiotics and iconography. And semiotics is basically like the visual association we make with things or symbols, based on like whatever they mean. And one thing he said was, when you're thinking about character designs, he was like, you should have three like staple things or images associated with that character, and then build everything else around that. And those three images should have something to do with their personality and their backstory.
Mm.
And so I was like, word, I like that. I follow that ideology. I did like tons, and I did a lot of research before and during the world building process.
Right.
Um, and so when it came to River, I'm like, okay, her and Nico grew up in this household that was very much geared towards power. That is the language of their household. Um, Nico, and y'all haven't learned this yet, but Savan, which is their father, he started training them at 5. So River is 2 to 3 years older than Nico. I can't remember the age gap. I want to say it's 3 though.
Hmm.
And so when River was born, he started training her at 5. And then when Nico was born, he started training him at 5. Right. So they've been trained to combat since 5 years old. Right. And River is like 21 now. Right. So that's a long ass time. And so given that, I was also thinking about, okay, how, as an older sibling, how would I react to this space? I kind of pulled from my own life as well, because I'm an older sibling. I have a sister that's 5 years younger than me. And we were not always in the safest environments either, right?
Hmm.
And I very much have like a much calmer demeanor than my sister, because I had to be the alert one. You feel
Hmm.
me? And she was at
Yep.
the ages where she didn't have that skill set. Um, and then it just spilled over into how I engage with everything, right? And so I'm like, okay, definitely want to have scars on her person, because training from that age, you're gonna have scars. I definitely want her to appear a more muscular woman.
Yeah,
But I actually have a pet peeve about how petite a lot of women characters are drawn to be.
it's true.
They are, yeah, when they're like, I'm like, bro, Wonder Woman does not look anything like a Gal Gadot. You feel me?
At
Like,
all.
she's not finna be that small, right?
Hmm.
And I think it's something that we also see a lot of in manga, where there are these women characters that really be kicking ass, but they body type does not match.
Like a little girl.
Yeah, yeah, you feel me? Like, even Sakura, right? Sakura gets a lot of hate. I personally don't hate Sakura as much as most people from Naruto. And she should be a little more stocky than she is to be as
Right.
strong as she is. You feel me?
Hmm.
So I was like, definitely want her to have that build. And I wanted her to have like, I wanted her to almost appear like I am the woman version of my father.
Mm.
Not necessarily on purpose, but I wanted that to be her aesthetic. And the demeanor that she has is, because y'all will eventually, even though Savant is dead, I have what I call like extra bouts, which are, I'm doing all the flashbacks or majority of the flashbacks separate from the story. So they're like individual chapters on their own, like short chapters.
Hmm.
Um, I've recently just finished scripting out one with Saban in it. So y'all will like see him eventually. And like when you do see him, it's like, okay, like, yo, this is like the same demeanor I got from River, but like times 10. You
Okay.
feel me? He plays even less games.
Gotcha.
Um, and so yeah, just thinking about how can I fit all of that into her character. The same with like her transformation. Because y'all haven't seen this yet either, but it is in chapter 2. All the alchemists, they have like a hand gesture that they do, which is Nico's hand gesture. They're like artwork of him doing it to
Hmm.
like perform the transmutation. River doesn't have to do that. And there's a reason why that like gets explained like
Right.
with the first couple of chapters. Um, and so even that of like, I can access this power without having to do the things that everybody else traditionally does, is also like kind of like a metaphor and analogy as well, because there are certain skill sets that I've picked up from being in like unsafe environments where I can access like my hypervigilance, or I can access my hyper attentiveness
Yeah.
way easier than like other people who were in that same setting, because I adapted in a different way. And I
Mm.
want all of that to like be present in her character and be present in the first chapter, because she isn't the main focus of the story, but she is hella important.
Oh, of
And
course.
so yeah, and I wanted everybody to like get to start to facilitate a relationship with her before they meet Nico,
Mm.
because you have to have some type of relationship with her for the story to do what it's supposed to do.
I would think so because I would the way I'm reading it, I'm like, okay, I gotta understand River before I understand Nico.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, especially even with a lot of siblings. You know what I'm saying? Like when you come to meet like maybe one of them first, maybe if it's only two of them in total. You know, when you meet the one and brother or sister, and then the one that you're actually like cool with, you understand why that person's that way.
Yep.
You know, you know what I'm saying? The personalities mesh.
Yeah.
They grew up in the same house,
Yep.
so be it. Now when we're talking about world building and basically what the IFC has done in basically just garnering up fighters and building this sort of operation uh,
Mhm.
through this ideal landlocked storyline that you built around this land called Jura.
Mhm. Mhm.
Now, you wrote a summary about it in the Kickstarter campaign. If you could speak on it briefly.
Yeah, yeah. So Jura is a predominantly Black continent. It is a mixture of like modern, it's kind of like in between modern and futuristic.
Yeah.
Uh, Almost like think like Avatar, but just like not with old cars and things.
Okay.
Legend of Korra specifically. And you know, they spiritual practices are a regular thing in the land. So not everybody knows how to use like their spiritual abilities, but people who can use spiritual abilities are not like an anomaly. Like it's not like, oh, these are a special section of people. You know, that's why there's a whole sport built around it, right? Because it's a thing that is immersed in the land. Everyone in Jura, for the most part, believes in a deity called the Source, which is a non-binary collective consciousness. And everything is funneled through the Source, and everything is funneled out of the Source. Is kind of how their religion goes.
Gotcha.
There's a grouping of scrolls called the Scriptum Deus, and there are 4 scrolls, and that's basically what all of the information and religion around the Source is based off of. And it in the mythology of the world is written by the person who basically came to Jura and settled and started like all these things.
Okay.
It's split up into 8 countries. 7 of the 8 countries have government leadership. Each country kind of has like its own way. Some are monarchies, some are democracies. It really depends. Some are more military based. All of them except Canada, which is where the Amaruk are from. They don't have a leader. There's a reason for that. Every tribe basically governs itself within that. All the 7 leaders make up what's called the crown of Jura. And what I was trying to do is there are certain parts of Jura that I kind of named to make it sound like the land is a body. Like the rivers in Jura are called bloodlines instead of rivers. The crown of Jura, of course, are the 7 leaders. There are 2 like primary like lakes within the continent. Those are called the eyes of Jura. Just playing around with that, because the relationship with the land is kind of one of like living on an organism. Like they respect the continent and those things. Each culture is very different, but one thing they all have in common is the belief in the Source, and they all fuck with the IFC. Everybody's down to watch people get their ass beat.
Got you. Now, later on in the story, are you creating this in a way to where the way that you just described it is being very tribal and there's factions involved? Does that coexist later on in the story where that plays a part in how the IFC basically operates as a whole? Does it impact the relationships of Nico and River and who they're more aligned with going forth? Does that happen?
It doesn't right now as it exists. And so for context, I've completely finished season 1, which is 14 chapters, and I started writing season 2. And I know where it's going, right? So like, I have like story beats that I definitely know I'm going to hit. And then there are things in between that I'm kind of mapping and like playing around with. So as it stands right now, there will be no real impact on the IFC besides like the commentary. And I will say for everyone that reads, like definitely pay attention to the commentary from Tone Loc and Mr. Gray, because their commentary actually is like giving out some like historical information low key.
I figured that.
Yeah. And so like I kind of use the IFC is almost like a medium to explain more things about the world, but in a way that like is exciting and doesn't feel like expedition. But the cultures and tribal things definitely impact River and Nico, because there is a lot of shit that there's just a lot of mess that their father left. All of which River knows more about than Nico, but there's still all of it is like going to come back around to them in some fashion.
Right.
And it also plays out in the different character dynamics. Like in chapter 2, y'all will get to see more about Anoki, Manu, and Shula, which are Enochi is the leader of the gym that Nico joins, and Imano and Shula are fighters under Enochi, and they're all three of them are from different cultures, and they're also all three from a different culture than Nico, right? And so it's definitely going to play out in their dynamics, their understanding of each other, and like how they interact, and what they value for real. Because in Europe, since most people are predominantly Black, it's not really like an ethnicity thing. You're kind of identified by your culture more than you are by like anything else.
Now, at one point in the book, River is, of course, generally in this first issue, River is having a battle with a young challenger by the name of Julius. And she basically says something to him that kind of like, I guess, it kind of gives away who she is. She basically told Julius that his speed was commendable, but my father was faster. So it was like, man, okay, so this young lady has gone through probably more rough battles with her father than anything, rather than most of these challenges that she's seeing from these dudes in the ring. So when I read that, I was like, damn. Yeah, I was like, okay. I like, man, like her dad must have been no joke.
He is arguably, I would say he is one of the top 3 strongest people to exist in the history of the continent. Especially like once y'all find out the story of, because Savan, River, Nico, they're all of the alchemist culture. And alchemists I like repurposing things. So like Atlanteans exist in this story, alchemists, but they all exist in like a way that like not like the way you're used to seeing them necessarily. And so alchemists, their transmutation doesn't come in the way of like turning other materials into gold. It comes in the way of like turning their bodies into gold, right? And so most alchemists are from this country called Immortalis. Savan left there. Nico and River did not grow up there. They grew up where the story takes place, which is Solterra. So like, and there's a reason why Savan left, and there's a whole thing that happened the night he left that like once y'all actually see it, y'all gonna be like, yo, nah, this man is like he really is. I don't want to say he's a horrible person.
Right. He's probably a very strong character, but he has a violent streak.
Yeah, he has a supreme violent streak, and he didn't. It's like one of those things where like he grew up in a like the alchemists are actually a privileged culture in the story. Next to Atlanteans, they are known to have the closest connection with the source. And I can't remember if I put this in a glossary or not in the back, but alchemists are like in a constant state of building spiritual pressure.
Right.
And they literally meditate, not even just to like calm themselves, but to stop themselves from becoming like vegetative. Because if your spiritual pressure exceeds what your body is able to withhold, you literally like go into shock. Yeah. And so like your body always has to be grown with your spirit and vice versa. You feel me? It's like a whole balance thing that I was really trying to articulate. And so like, given that, you know, he was already like born into having a high spiritual pressure, but because most alchemists are not as violent as him, they also don't usually appear to be as strong as he is.
Right.
But leaning into the violence, it's like, yo, that's crazy. It's like a Red Hood type of situation where it's like, you know, Bruce Wayne trained everybody the same.
Yeah.
You feel me? But Jason Todd was like, I'm actually going to kill people. You feel me? Like, and so he different than Nightwing, the other Robin, and like all those things. And it's very much one of those type things. And like, but he also will have an internal conflict that y'all will learn about as well, because I don't want to have any one-dimensional characters.
Of course.
I'm trying to be really intentional about that, but I'm also just like doling things out, because that's how it works in real life. Like, there are people in my family who I've had frictional relationships with until I learn more about them, and I'm like, oh, that's why you're like that. And it doesn't make that shit okay, but it does give me understanding. And then I can show up and I can offer more grace and I can offer more space for these things. And then we can navigate in a more healthy way, because I now understand the things you weren't articulating. You feel me? And so I want the rollout in the manga to be similar to that, where it's like you develop whatever your thoughts are, whether it be love or hate, right? And then more information comes out and it's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't love them for this, or maybe I shouldn't hate them for this, you know. And it's like, I gotta sit with that type of thing.
True. Now you've discussed Naruto quite a bit. What other animes have inspired this book?
So I definitely say Naruto is probably one of the biggest ones. And that is because I literally started watching Naruto in middle school. So me and Naruto were the same age. And I grew up with this man, in the sense of like, I remember when I was 25 is when he got married to Hinata. You feel me? And so I'm like, yo, like it's really parallel.
Right. When you get to see your characters grow like that, it's different.
Yeah, it's that shit is different. And me and Sasuke have a lot in common, because Sasuke is the last person alive with his family name, because you know Itachi dies eventually. And if whoever's watching this, if you didn't know that, I'm sorry. But Naruto's been out for a while now, so it's like,
right.
You know what I'm saying? And I am the last person in my family with my last name. Everybody else has a different last name now. So I related to that. I come from an old family, so a lot of people have passed on. So there were like a lot of parallels. And I think that there was so much there that Kishimoto put to like work with. And I always just felt like, just what does it look like to tackle this from just like a more mental health standpoint? Like we're literally watching 12-year-olds get groomed for war. You feel me? That shit hit you different. They not finna be all the way that we were seeing them, you know what I'm saying?
There's no normal days for those kids. Like they're not going to the grocery store with their mom or anything like that. There's no playtime at the beach. No, it's training.
I'm learning how to throw kunai. You feel me? Like that shit is different. So that definitely is a big inspiration. And you know, reading the manga was a big inspiration. I will also say, I draw a lot of inspiration from, ironically enough, from like things that have nothing to do with anime sometimes, like poetry. And the things that being a poet in the community have instilled in me. I really like everything that One does. So like One Punch Man, Mob Psycho 100, the way that he writes overpowered characters, I thoroughly appreciate. And then My Hero Academia, specifically because My Hero Academia did something that I haven't seen many other anime do before it. And it really is a focal point of the story. They made a story that revolved around a hero that's no longer active. Everything is about All Might, right? But he's not the main character. You feel me? Like,
he's an inspiration piece now.
And we're watching everything happen, but it's all happening because of All Might's actions. And what that does is it creates a world where your main character or main characters don't necessarily have to be the heroes because they didn't create the problem.
Mm.
And so like everything happening in the world exists outside of them, and then we're just watching them be a part of it. And I really, really like that, because that's one of the things that I hate about Dragon Ball Z. You feel me? Where it's like everything revolves around Goku, and Goku is still very much active. And if Goku is not present, nobody finna win. You
Right.
feel me? And that whole dynamic is like everybody is basically a damsel in distress. You already know with somebody engaging in a fight that they're not finna win, because everything is set up for Goku to be the hero. But
Yep.
when you have a story that's based around somebody that isn't active anymore, anyone can be the hero at any time. Like we see other people have dope moments besides Deku. You feel me?
It's true.
And I was like, yo, I really want to have that vibe where the story is about Nico and what he's grappling with, but everybody has shining moments. You feel me? And nobody is dependent on Nico to show up to save them, because everybody can hold their own. And so you never actually know who finna lose. And sometimes Nico gonna lose. You feel me? So it's like, you know, yeah. So I feel like those are my biggest inspirations.
So you talked about your spoken word poetry. Like how were you able to transition? Because you've been in this community for a real long time. How were you able to transition? You write poetry for a living, you know, like into storyboarding is in manga and in comic book writing. Like I know this is like, you know, of course, you know, this is your first series going into it, but like to actually like do it on this large scale and to write the way that you do, like you're writing, you know,
long form,
long form poetry into sectional panels and storyboarding sections and settings.
So it's funny. I started writing poetry in 8th grade, right? Not because I wanted to, but because my English teacher, our end of the year project was to make a poetry book. I had never wrote a poem before, never heard a poem before, never read a poem.
Shout out to her. What's her name?
Miss Rado. Yeah, Miss Rado. She was a real one. 8th grade English. And so yeah, I don't even think she really know. Like she literally shifted the trajectory of my life. But prior to doing that, I used to draw. And I literally would staple sheets of computer paper together and make comics. You feel me? And then once I found poetry, I liked the way it made me feel better. And so I stopped drawing and like leaned into writing more heavily. But I think that visual sense never left me. I just cultivated it in different ways. Like I was rapping for a good period of time, and I had a rap group, and I shot most of our music videos. I edited most of the music videos. I did most of like the album covers and things like that. So I was always working in spaces that were like nurturing my visual mind. It just wasn't comics. But because I consume so much manga and comics, and like I'm like a real nerd with this shit, where it's like I'm not strictly just reading. I'm like looking at behind the scenes videos, and I'm listening to interviews and creators and like all that stuff. And I'm absorbing all of this. And so when it came time for me to like, when I decided I wanted to craft a story, which I first made this decision back in 2016. And I literally have a Google Drive with 13 folders, because I counted them, 13 folders of different worlds and characters and stories and plots. And all of them are just ones that I couldn't stick with. Because I was writing things that I thought were entertaining and not things that I was emotionally invested in.
Right.
And I was like, well, something has to be wrong if I'm not sticking with these things. Like, because I didn't think, I'm a very spiritual person. And I didn't think I was doing something I wasn't purposed to do. So it has to be my approach that's the problem. You feel me? So I went down like this rabbit hole of research about like writing a manga, best practices, so on and so forth. And all of that helped me streamline my skill set in a way that made the transition easier. And then because I had like a visual background with like digital media and photography and all these things, basically the way I broke it down for myself is whatever I write, I'm now just breaking it down into screenshots.
Mm.
That's it. So it's like a
Uh,
movie. And so like when I'm writing, the script in my head is actually playing out like in motion. You feel me? And then I'm like, okay, where are the freeze frames that articulate these motions the best? And then that's how I break the script down into panels. Because like my scripts, they actually say like panel one, this is what's happening, and then the dialogue, panel two, this is what's happening in the dialogue.
right.
Um, and yeah, so it's like it's kind of like a multi-step process for me, but all of that was just because of how many hours I put into research, honestly, and like absorbing game from all these other creators I was watching on YouTube and like breaking that stuff down.
Dope. Dope. So let's talk about your publishing company, Black Minds Publishing. What
Mhm.
is it? And of course, I want you to speak to your partnership with Tommy Horsey.
Yes, yes. So Black Minds Publishing is a national publications platform geared towards the personal and professional growth of Black creatives. So we offer various publishing packages for Black authors, and that can be, cookbooks, poetry books, self-help books. If you have a comic or anything, well, I won't say right now you could apply with a comic, but that is a goal. I want to be able to facilitate that as well.
Gotcha.
But we also help with just foundational career building things. So we make EPKs, we help formulate artistic bios, we help you read through your social media analytics to figure out what's the best way to approach promotion. We help like get all of that stuff together. We do logo design, all of that, because I really wanted to create a space where I could utilize all the things I've done for myself
Mm-hmm.
in a way that help artists have sustainable careers. And that's also why I don't take any royalties. So like when you publish with us, you pay us whatever is required for like the publishing package that you choose.
Yeah.
And then after that, we don't touch none of that money. All the money you make from your book goes to you, strictly. And so, I really want people to be able to uh, build a foundation for themselves that they can like then springboard off of. And any way I can help with that, I'm down. And Tommy, I actually met. I used to be the creative director for this organization called Urgent 365.
Mm-hmm.
They are still active, actually, and they are running. They're collecting donations right now for their annual trunk party. They do a trunk party every year that provides essential living items to students of color who are going to live on campus their first year.
Okay.
So, you can find them at Urgent 365 on all social media. But yeah, I was their creative director and Tommy was the vice president.
Mm.
Um,
Okay.
and so we became friends just through a mutual friend, because we were both friends with the president of the organization, Jasmine Hawkins.
Mm-hmm.
And then, he's like a big nerd, just like me. And so, spending time chopping it up.
Yeah.
And I told him I was working on a manga, and I brought it to him in like the really early stages, right? I was like, yo, I'm thinking about doing this sports manga, but it's like they have superpowers in the MMA. And he was like, nigga, what? And I was like, yo, you just trust me. And he was like, look, bro, I trust you as a writer. I heard your poems. You feel me? I know your work.
Right.
I'm gonna just, I'm gonna take your word for it. So, I start crafting things out, and I'm just talking to him more as I'm like crafting him and sharing more information of the story. And one day, he was taking me back home, and he was like, yo, I was thinking about your manga, and I had this cool idea for a character. And I was like, oh, okay, run it by me. And at that time, I really wasn't looking to have any assistance with the
Yeah.
manga. Mainly because I struggle with trusting people creatively.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm bougie. That's the best way to put it. You feel me? Like I'm bougie. I like really high quality shit. You feel me?
Right.
Like all around the board. Like there is no area in my life where I don't like things to be quality.
Mm-hmm.
And not that other people don't, but I think my idea of quality is just very specific, and sometimes me and other people don't align, right?
Yeah.
And so I just be mindful of that. And I think also because I was part of that rap group and that dissolved, I probably have some like PTSD from that shit for real, because it didn't necessarily dissolve amicably.
Gotcha.
So he was like, yeah, I was thinking about this character who can like change his body depending on what he needs to do, like in a fight. And he was like, if he has to have a fighting style that requires him to be bulkier, he can like bulk up, or if he has a fighting style that needs him to be slimmer, he could slim down and da 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 da.
Yeah.
That character eventually became Asta, who is the character with the pigmentation, the vitiligo. And that still is like a part of his character. I reworked it a little bit, but when he was telling me the idea, I was like, yo, that shit sounds dope. And then that gave me faith in his ability to give me input. Cause like one thing I'm real big on is like all help is not good help.
It's true.
Like sometimes people try to help you based off what they think you should be doing instead of what you articulated you're trying to do. And Tommy showed me that he was trying to help me based off what I told him I was trying to do and not what he thought the manga should be for himself.
Gotcha. Right?
And so I was like, yo, do you want to like be the editor? And he's a very particular person. Like he's like this doesn't make sense right here. Like he's that guy.
He's a proofreader.
Yeah. So he was like, yeah, absolutely. So he started reading over the scripts. He holds me accountable for continuity things. He holds me accountable if he feels like characters have dialogue that don't match how they've been showing up previously or where he understands them to be going. Because of course he knows like most of what I have planned out about the story. And yeah, it's been really amazing working with him. And like he's actually my friend too. So it's like having like that connection where he knows me outside of the work, I think helps him show up even better as an editor because he knows where like I'm pulling from. He knows where these things are coming from. He knows like what they mirror in real life. And sometimes he can give me that push of like, yo, this sounds like this conversation you had with such and such. Maybe you can tweak it so that you can include like that nuance that you explained to me about that actual conversation you had. You feel me? And so it's like that. Yeah, it's been dope. I recommend everybody, if you are working on a project, have somebody that you trust and that understands your vision reading over that shit, because you're not going to catch everything. Right. You're just not. And sometimes as the creator, you're juggling so much because I'm already like at the end of the story in terms of like what I'm thinking about, right? Like it's so much shit I'm thinking about that y'all haven't even seen. It's good to have somebody who ain't thinking about none of that. And it's just like, no, this doesn't make sense right now, like in real time. You feel me? So yeah, I've read a good amount of works where I'm like, you don't have an editor. and I can tell.
Right.
You feel me? Yeah.
Got you. So like for anybody that's looking to get their hands on issue 1, and of course with the Kickstarter still live right now, how can they reach out to you in order to see your work?
Yeah. So we are on IG at Immortal Dark Manga. Everything is spelled exactly how it sounds. The link in the bio right now is to the Kickstarter. And I would recommend, if you want chapter 1, to just back the Kickstarter, because then you could potentially get chapter 2 as well, depending on what rewards here you got. But if you are impatient and you want it, right now, we now have an official website, immortaldarkmanga.com. So you can go there, and there is a purchase link to a digital download of the first copy. But the Kickstarter has, for chapter 1, it has an exclusive cover that will not be available outside of the Kickstarter. So yeah, shout out to Flatliner 74. He did the artwork for the exclusive cover. And yeah, once the Kickstarter is done, that's the only time you'll be able to get that. So I recommend backing the Kickstarter. But yeah, you can go to immortaldarkmanga.com and there's links for chapter 1 and the art book that we have also.
Dope. So, brother, I appreciate you doing this with me.
Yo, thank you, man.
No, absolutely, man. This has been wonderful, man. Especially just getting to know you and exactly what you're putting together on the page and how you've actually crafted it. It's been it's excellent to see. So, a week left in the Kickstarter, but yet they can go to immortaldarkmanga.com.
Yes.
Reach out to the brother, get the books, put them in your hands. Hope to see more of you, bro. For real.
Yo, look, you definitely will. And if no one tells you this, which I will hope, I hope people have, I really appreciate your thoroughness with the interview, bro. Like, I appreciate people who like really deep dive and like take time to like really absorb the material, because it shows that you actually care and that you invested. You feel me? And you're not just here to like get views or be on a platform. It's like, yo, nah, I'm actually deep diving into this material and I am sitting with it because it deserves that. You feel me? And that is more rare than I think we are always aware of. And so I appreciate you for that, bro, for real.
Absolutely, man. It's the only way. You know what I'm saying? The only way to respect the art form is to actually respect it by reading it.
Yo, for sure. For sure.
So from James Grandmaster Facts Boyce, James Enoch Church, we are out.